How many times do you find yourself replaying the behaviors of your parents? What are your resources to handle emotional conflict? We are educated, trained, or supported to learn many things in our lives. However, we are not educated in how to have healthier relationships. What can we do to heal our childhood wounds? Those are the questions that are going to help us to have much better and healthier interactions. Many of us carry a big burden or a big baggage of not knowing what to do with our emotions, allowing the feelings and regulate in a productive way our interactions. Breaking these toxic cycles is what can bring a new generation that finally can change the settings that we are replaying. Those are the reflections that I'm going to speak about to introduce chapter 2 of my book, Cultivating a New Generation. And if you remember in our last video of this book, we were talking about the story of Mario and Betty. So I'm going to recap quickly what happened in the story, and then we are going to go right off to the thought takeaways so that we can take advantage of the learning process. Doing a quick recap of Betty and Mario's story, we left off with the sudden departure of Betty when she told Mario she was pregnant, and the confusion or shock that Mario had after that. Betty managed to get away from Mario at least 2 weeks by shutting off her cell phone and telling her mother to tell Mario that she was on a business trip. Mario, on the other hand, made many efforts to try to contact her, but he was not successful. Plus, he also needed some thinking to do about what road to take or the different circumstances and consequences of going through with the pregnancy. So if you remember, the plot of the story is that Betty is pregnant and Mario is not accepting well the pregnancy. So he was shocked, he was paralyzed, he didn't know what to say, and we are going to dive deep into this kind of process. Both of them have time to process the situation and to look for answers. What Betty did is that she had a more reliable network of friends, and she found confidence in one of her most reliable friends named Karen. So Karen started speaking with her about the issues, and she listened to what happened in the situation. So she was explaining how men react when they are faced with an emotional conflict such as this news. On the other hand, Mario also was looking for help in order to process this emotional conflict. But as we are going to mention in the takeaways, for men it is more difficult to find people to rely on. And in this case of the story, Mario had a very challenging situation in finding someone to trust. Finally, he came up with the idea that Liam, his cousin, was going to be able to help him because he already had a family and he was a successful entrepreneur, so he knew how to deal with these kind of situations. So in the process of helping Mario, Liam asked him some kind of questions. So I'm going to read the questions so that you can know what is the process of reflecting upon your life and what kind of things you can do when you have a conflict in terms of emotions. So Liam asked him, what do you want in terms of your relation with Betty? What do you see in her that helps you feel more secure about you? What are the things you don't like in her? Are they tolerable? Do you know her parents, her family, and do you know that if they are going to accept you and you are going to be able to resonate with them? So after hearing those questions, as they were deeper questions, Mario started feeling anxious again. So he had an episode of anxiety. What do you do when you are in an episode of anxiety triggered by something emotional? What he did was start breathing. Remember that when we breathe, we start regulating and sending signals to our body so that we can process our emotions, and so the adrenaline and cortisol that are being raised are lower, and we start adjusting our signals so that our body returns to normal. By breathing and just probably, if you can, closing your eyes, you are detaching from the triggers, the visual triggers, and the situation, and you concentrate more on your heartbeats and the breathing exercises. So those are things that quickly return you to to a more stable situation. So in different paradigms, in different situations of men and women, why do they react like that? Why do men and women are different in the biology, in the social situations, and in the emotional handling of the conflict? Let's start with women. Women, as we have heard, and based on evolution, usually process their pain or emotional issues in a more personal way, and they are easily trained and they have that skill of sharing what they feel emotionally. So that's what happens with them when they are faced with an emotional situation. In the case of men, men are wired biologically different and emotionally different, and we tend with emotional issues by doing what we learned through history and evolution. What is that? To swallow the emotions, to not say that we have an emotional problem, because we are educated as men don't cry. That is one of the phrases that we hear many times. Another kind of phrase that we can hear is that you should be a man and deal with the situation and forget about any kind of emotions and move on. So, as you didn't process the emotion, what happens? Your hormones start racing and the adrenaline start racing, and what do? Usually, also, men tend to look for a substance to numb the pain that they are feeling, such as alcohol or any kind of drug. That's the beginning of an addiction. So that's why also we see more issues in terms of gender for men than for women in terms of addiction. So what is happening biologically? Women tend to feel more overwhelmed by hormones of stress. So they are more used to those kind of hormones because they are wired biologically to support and to withstand more quantities of cortisol, because they have a womb, because they can give birth and they can create life. So they have this difference because they protect the fetus from higher levels of cortisol. So what is happening with this protection? When the fetus doesn't have that protection, or when the mother is constantly under stress, which is not something that also she is built for, this cortisol can pass through the placenta and can pass through that barrier and can affect the fetus in terms of mood disorders in adulthood, immune dysfunctions in adulthood, because they receive more stress. Those kind of changes are epigenetic changes that are happening without you knowing that is there. So by just having a difficult relationship when you are pregnant, you are going to start triggering your child that will have to deal with those kind of deficiencies in adulthood. So that's the main idea of being aware of what kind of stress you are having, more if you are pregnant. What happens with men? Men don't have that property, biological property, to withstand higher levels of cortisol. So when men are dealt with hormones of stress, what they have to do is to release this kind of stress physically, or they have to take it out in yelling or running away. So those are the three options that they were biologically wired for. That doesn't mean that it's okay. That just means that is your biology, and that doesn't mean also that you cannot be trained to do it in a different way, to learn how to breathe, to learn that you can just take a walk, or to learn that you can just, over the time, meditate and regulate your mind. But if you don't even know how to process your emotions because you were trained not to cry or not to accept your emotions and you swallow them, so it is just more difficult. That's the response. So what else happens with the kind of men? Men isolate. So they don't want to talk. They just want to be in the cave. They go away and they don't know how to deal with that kind of pressure that they are having inside. So if they show their emotions in any part of their lives, usually they are criticized, they are bullied, and they are undervalued, and their masculinity is questioned. Because how are you going to show your emotions if you are a man? So many of these things are programmed in the brain of men since they are children. That's why we have to change a lot of things in terms of the cultural beliefs, in terms of the patterns, and in terms of the biology, and we can always change. That's why it's the plasticity of our biology, of our brains, the rewiring of the neurons, and the construction of new pathways. We can start doing that. And that is the solution of these kind of problems. We have to educate in a different way women and men, and we have to educate them in how are they constructed, how are they built inside, what is the patterns, what is the society, what is the social, what is the biology. All of these aspects are important because they all contribute to the response that we are going to have when we have an emotional issue. So this is one of the takeaways that you can find inside of the book, inside of the story of Cultivating a New Generation. And the idea of this book is to give you, through this kind of story, a different setting and explaining all the situations in terms of biology, science, and social patterns that we have seen over the time. So if you want to go deeper into this chapter, into the story, and into the takeaways, I posted a link that you can just click and you will listen to the episode 20 of my podcast, where I explain in a deeper way what is happening with men and women. Thank you very much for paying attention, Consuelo. Thank you very much, Vicky, for being here. And if it resonates and if it helped you, and if you know that it can help someone, problems with relationships, just help me to share this information. Thank you and have a wonderful Tuesday. Bye.